It's President Richard Nixon's second term as the President of the United States, and he's not having the best time. He's been able to block the journalists at some of their turns, but unfortunately they've managed to recruit the help of Dean Sloan, and they've managed to draw a line of evidence directly to Richard Nixon. If the journalists can just corroborate one more line of evidence to another contact, they will win the game. But Richard is doing alright himself. He just needs to maintain his momentum and get out of office before they manage to pull that off, and he is the winner overall. If this sounds even remotely interesting to you, welcome to Watergate. This is a two-player head-to-head dueling tug of war game by Matthias Kramer, and I just gotta make a mention about this cover art. It's absolutely gorgeous. I feel like I'm about to watch a 90s political thriller, and it's just really nice looking right there. So, yeah. So, this game is actually really interesting. Each player has their own hand of cards which they'll be using to play some tug of war with. And this tug of war really is the base of the game. There is a bunch of stuff going on over here, but we'll leave that alone for the moment. The moment-to-moment gameplay is worrying about this tug of war, and that is where the absolute brilliance of Watergate lies, because you have all of this stuff here, which is always going to be of use to you in one way or another, whether it be for, let's just say on the journalist, for example, having the ability to go first is really important, because it allows you to get a bit of a step ahead of Richard Nixon, and it also gives you an extra card in your hand, which means you always get one extra action per turn. But momentum. You don't want Richard Nixon to be getting on a roll and getting out of office really quick. So maintaining the fight for that is always going to be interesting as well. But then you've got the evidence, and you need the evidence in order to make your connections across the board. This is always going to be a really useful thing for you to go for. So having these 5 things and having to play tug of war over them, handing them back and forth, deciding what you need next, is always the core of this game, and it's the most brilliant part of it because of the way the cards work. So allow me to show you some of the cards. So for example here, we've got a journalist. This is going to be like one of the biggest cards that you can use just regularly as the journalist side of the board. You have 2 sides to each of them. The top one lets you move evidence or the tokens. So you've always got an option to move something, but then you've got the bottom side, which is usually a much more powerful effect, but the majority of the cards in this game, let's just say the Watergate complex, will often require you to remove them from the game in order to use these abilities. But these abilities are really strong. Like for example, say this one only lets you move 1 evidence 3 steps, or 1 token 3 steps. This lets you move a token 3 steps, a face-up piece of evidence 2 steps, and a face-down piece of evidence 1 step. So, really powerful, really good for maintaining control of the board, but once you use it, it's gone. It's out of the game for good. So, really interesting way to handle tug of war, because you're always deciding whether or not you want to burn these cards now for their really powerful abilities, or whether or not you want to use the top half and see if it's worth saving for later. Because the thing about most of the top half cards here, these are usually more powerful on the cards that you can throw away. So you're just thinking to yourself, is this worth throwing away now? Is this worth hanging on to and using it later? Especially in situations like this early in the round, where nothing's moved yet. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going to happen. So let's say Bob Woodward just puts down, say, the journalist card here, and he's like, do you have a blue evidence? Because Richard Nixon draws evidence from this bag at the start of every round. He knows what the face down evidence is, but you don't. You have to ask him directly whether or not any of these are blue evidence. He says there is, and he moves 1 down to your side. Great. But now, Richard Nixon gets his turn to react to that. And he doesn't have much to move blues, but he does have the ability to move greens, and thankfully that's a green. But he can also decide to do something really interesting. Like, he can take one of these things out of the game entirely, because when you move something to the 5th space, you instantly get that. So he can decide to do that, but at the same time, he doesn't know whether or not the other player is going to do that, so he might decide to just do something simple, like let's just say, the president speaks. He will just use that, he'll use that card, and he will move the momentum token towards him. So now the journalist player is under threat, because he needs to keep Nixon as far away from momentum tokens as possible. So he thinks to himself, okay, what should I do here? Is it worth the effort to spend some time getting that back? But because Nixon could be saving something in his hand in order to get that evidence back while he's distracted. So, for example, cancer on the presidency. One of the most mic drop cards I've ever seen in a video game. He gets to move one evidence 3 steps and then end the round immediately, which is absolutely ridiculous, but it's great if you can pull it off with everything on your side. So as a result, you're always wondering what to do. Like for this example here, say that we've got this evidence on our side and we have the card that lets us get that informant, but if we play that and reveal that we've got the informant that we need, Nixon might decide to simply just end the round. Move that evidence right up to his side of the track so that we can't use it. Use it to block off that path of that part of the map there. Or he might decide to ignore it. He might decide to go for the momentum token. He might decide to just try and move it back the regular way. And it's these choices which are really important to making Watergate feel as tense and tight as it is, because you never know what things might be useful to you in the future. You might get a lot of momentum going, but then it's like, oh, Richard Nixon got all the evidence. That's not a good start. Or any other combinations of ridiculous strategies. And as a result, Watergate is tense all the way through. Extremely tense. Hell, it's even a bit of a cooldown when everything is on any particular side of the track and the round ends and it's like, okay, the player with the initiative gets to put down their evidence. Even if you find yourself thinking, oh, what am I going to do here in order to prevent anything from happening? So the journalists get to put it face up. Nixon gets to put it all face down. So you think to yourself, cripes, he might be able to block that. I need to focus on that evidence. Or I'm going to have to give up on that and maybe try and go for John Dean instead, because there's still a fair amount of yellow evidence left and I might be able to make a connection through these two parts here. There are so many options, so many strategies, and it genuinely works really damn well. The Tug of War is always tense. The cards are great with the balance of the more powerful effects for just regular movement or the even more powerful effects that can be only used once per game. It's really well done, and it's just multiplied on top of by this theme. And not just in the sense that, like, it's got a little bit of historical flavor going on, but just the ideas of, like, having this evidence that's literal, like, pin-up evidence going on this board, and then having to draw chains between it, like some 80s detective romp, or some crazy YouTuber having it in the background of all of his videos, or just having, like, all of it be, like, scribbled out like this, just with this highlighter pen, or having, like, the real photos going on here with, like, the quotes down the bottom, too. And that's not just for fluff. That's not just for flavor. They have done a lot of research into this topic. So let's have a look at the Watergate Manual. You've got just, like, the first 10 pages, and that is entirely for the game itself. So 10 pages, it's not that much. Maybe it's a little bit much, but they are very clear about what does what and what affects what, even when it's a bit redundant. So it does make for a good rulebook, but then the second half just elevates it. So not only do you get full-on background information about Watergate, not only do you get a full-on historical reference for Watergate, you get what every single card does, who the historical figure related to it was, and even then, at the back of the book, recommended sources for more information with a bunch of books related to the Watergate scandal. I cannot praise this approach enough. It is really well done. It is more than enough to get you interested in the historical events surrounding Watergate, and as a result, the game is just really good. The Tug of War is tense moment to moment. The strategic element of placing your evidence, deciding whether or not you want to go for evidence, deciding whether or not it's time to bring out that informant or save them for later, or even just getting them out before Richard Nixon can do it, and blocking them off from your view, like this green guy here who's been scribbled right the hell out. Really tense moment to moment thanks to the Tug of War. Really tense minute to minute thanks to the fact of how they've handled the strategic side of things, whether it be taking more turns, adding your momentum, or placing evidence on the board. And it's really historically detailed. It's got all the detail it needs. It's using real photographs, real quotes, and it's got 10 pages in the back of the manual dedicated to what cards were made from what events and what characters. And as a result, I find myself more than happy to recommend Watergate to anyone. It is an absolutely great time. It's relatively easy to learn. It's very easy to pick up and play. And the games are relatively balanced. Richard Nixon does have a little bit of advantage, I found, but it can still turn out in so many ways. If the journalists are really quick about it, they can get like a full line of evidence, like from Nixon to 2 contacts in this way, before Nixon can even blink. But if they let Nixon have even an inch, one really well done game I played with a friend of mine resulted in a blacked out Great Wall of China right down the middle, blocking off over half of the informants to me. Not to mention a bunch of it off to the side here. It was an incredibly good play, and I just could not hold him off for long enough for him to get his momentum after that. It was so well done. The games can turn out so differently, and as a result, yeah, really damn good. Highly recommended. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.